"This song is for you, sir," the Maid's Toddler sang. The billionaire froze when he heard the last line. The study smelled like leather and cold coffee. James Calloway stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp as a blade. "Tell Kane I don't care what the board thinks. We vote Thursday, not a day later." He didn't hear the small voice at first. It came from the rug near his desk, soft and unsteady, the way toddlers sing when they don't know anyone is listening. A 3-year-old girl sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a wooden block in each hand, humming a tune that curled through the room like smoke. James's hand did not move. His voice did. "James. James, are you there?" He wasn't. Something on the 5th note of the melody made his chest go tight. Then the 6th. Then the words came, small and clear, in a voice too little to know what it was singing. "Hush now, baby, don't you cry. Mama's here, and so am I." The phone slipped from his fingers and hit the carpet without a sound. Across the room, Maria Delgado, the new housekeeper, feather duster forgotten in her hand, turned pale as she watched her employer's face change. "Sophia, baby, that's enough now," she started, reaching for her daughter. "No." James's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Don't stop her." Sophia looked up at him with wide brown eyes, unbothered, and kept humming, rocking a little to her own rhythm. James Calloway had heard that exact melody only twice before in his life. Once, sung to him in a hospital room by a woman with an 4-line in her arm and not much time left. And once, on a cracked voice memo he still couldn't bring himself to delete. Both times, it had been his wife singing it. Both times, she'd been dying. Elena had been gone 3 years. There was no possible way a stranger's little girl could know a song that existed nowhere except inside his phone and inside his grief. James knelt down slowly, like the floor might give way beneath him. "Sweetheart," he said, in a voice none of his employees had ever heard from him, "where did you learn that song?" Sophia only smiled and hummed on, the last 2 notes trailing off, unfinished, like everything else in his life. Maria's hand found her daughter's shoulder, protective, uncertain. James looked up at her, and the question that came out of him next would change both of their families forever. "Who taught your daughter that song?" Maria's mouth opened, then closed. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Calloway. She hums all sorts of things. Cartoons, mostly. I never taught her that one." "Someone did." James was still on the floor, still at Sophia's eye level, like a man who'd forgotten how to stand. "That's not a cartoon song. That's not anything you'd hear on the radio." "Sir, I really don't. Please." The word surprised them both. James Calloway did not say please to his staff. He barely said good morning. "I'm not angry. I just need to know." Maria studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his face made her lower her guard, just slightly. "I'll try to remember," she said quietly. "Give me some time." He nodded, and picked his phone up off the floor like it belonged to someone else. 3 weeks earlier, none of this had seemed possible. Maria Delgado had walked up the long gravel driveway of the Calloway estate with one suitcase, one toddler on her hip, and a folder of references clutched so tight the paper had wrinkled. She needed this job. Not wanted, needed. Her last position had ended when the family moved overseas, and 2 months of savings had turned into 2 weeks, then 2 days. The housekeeping agency had warned her, "Mr. Calloway is difficult. Distant. His wife passed a few years back, and he hasn't been the same since. Most staff don't last 6 months. Maria didn't need 6 months. She needed enough to get back on her feet." The mansion was the kind of beautiful that felt cold. Tall windows, marble floors, no photographs anywhere except one, turned face down on a shelf in the study that nobody was allowed to touch. James Calloway had looked at her exactly once during the interview. He'd asked no questions about her life, her daughter, her reasons. Just, "Can you keep the house running without bothering me?" "Yes, sir," she'd said, though something in her wanted to add that a house wasn't a house without a little noise in it. She kept that thought to herself. Old Thomas, the butler who'd worked the estate for 11 years, had shown her around on the first day. He was kind in a tired sort of way, like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had learned to carry it quietly. He wasn't always like this, Thomas told her, nodding toward the closed study door. Before Mrs. Calloway passed, this house used to have music in it. Real music. Now it just has silence. What happened to her? Thomas's eyes flicked to Maria's, weighing whether to say more. Complications, after the baby came. The little one followed her a few weeks later. Heart condition, they said. James doesn't talk about it. Nobody's allowed to. Maria had held Sophia a little tighter that night, grateful in a way that felt almost guilty. For the first 2 weeks, James Calloway was exactly as advertised. A closed door, a clipped voice on the phone, dinner trays left outside the study because he didn't want to be seen eating alone at the long table built for a family that no longer existed. Sophia, however, did not understand the concept of staying out of a billionaire's way. She toddled into rooms she wasn't supposed to enter. She left wooden blocks in the hallway. Once, she wandered into the study while James was on a call and simply sat down on his rug like she'd always belonged there, humming to herself while stacking blocks into a crooked tower. The first time it happened, James snapped at Maria to keep her daughter contained. The second time, he said nothing at all, just watched Sophia build her tower, knock it down, and laugh like it was the funniest thing in the world. The third time, something in him softened enough that when the tower fell and Sophia looked up at him for a reaction, James, almost against his will, said, "Try building it wider at the bottom. It won't fall as easy." Sophia tried it. It worked. She beamed up at him like he'd handed her the secret to the universe. Maria, watching from the doorway, saw something flicker across her employer's face that she hadn't seen since she'd arrived. It looked almost like the beginning of a smile. It was during a quiet afternoon, polishing picture frames that held no pictures, that Maria mentioned it without thinking. "I used to work nights before this," she said, half to herself, half to Thomas, who was helping her carry linens. "At Riverside Memorial. Maternity ward. Burned myself out after 2 years, honestly, that's part of why I took this job instead." Thomas made a small sound in his throat and glanced toward the study door, which was cracked open more than usual. James Calloway stood on the other side of it, phone in hand, utterly still. "Riverside Memorial," he repeated, stepping into the hallway before he could stop himself. His voice had gone very quiet. "The maternity ward. What years?" Maria blinked at the sudden intensity. 3 years ago, mostly. "Why?" James did not answer right away. He looked at her the way a man looks at a door he isn't sure he wants to open. "That's the hospital," he finally said, "where my wife died." The silence that followed felt longer than it was. "I'm so sorry," Maria said softly. "I didn't know. I would never have brought it up if I—" "It's all right." James's jaw was tight, but his voice wasn't unkind. "You couldn't have known." He turned to leave, then stopped himself. Her name was Elena. Elena Calloway. She was in the ward for almost 3 weeks before everything happened. "Did you?" He stopped, hating how much hope had crept into his voice. "Did you ever care for a patient by that name?" Maria's brow furrowed as she searched her memory, 3 years and hundreds of patients deep. "I worked the overnight rotation. So many faces, Mr. Calloway. I wish I could tell you yes, but I honestly don't remember every name." James nodded, disappointment sitting heavy on his shoulders, and disappeared back into the study. Maria stood in the hallway a long moment, unsettled by something she couldn't name. Over the following days, something shifted in the house. James started leaving his study door open. He started appearing at dinner instead of hiding behind it. He started, without quite admitting it to himself, watching for Sophia's small footsteps in the hallway. One evening, he found himself sitting on the nursery floor, a room that had sat locked and untouched for 3 years, until Maria, following his hesitant instructions, had aired it out and given it new life as a play space for Sophia. Sophia handed him a wooden block. "Build," she instructed, with the total confidence of a toddler who assumes everyone exists to help her. James built. And for the first time in 3 years, inside the room that used to be his daughter Lily's nursery, he didn't feel like the walls were closing in. Maria watched from the door, arms crossed, feeling something complicated stir in her chest. It was good, watching her daughter bring light into this cold house. It was also, in a way she didn't examine too closely, a little frightening, how quickly her employer had started looking at Sophia like she mattered to him. "She's not replacing anyone," Maria said carefully, one evening, after James had spent nearly an hour reading Sophia a picture book in a voice softer than Maria had ever heard him use. "I need you to know that. Sophia isn't, she can't be a stand-in for what you lost." James looked up, stung, then thoughtful. "I know that," he said. I think she's just reminding me that houses are supposed to have noise in them. That's all." It wasn't all, and some part of both of them knew it. But neither pushed further. Then came the second clue. It was a rainy Tuesday, and Maria was folding laundry in the small staff sitting room when the memory surfaced, unbidden, the way old memories do. A young woman. 24, maybe 25. Alone in her hospital room for most of her stay, though a tall man visited some evenings, always looking like he was barely holding himself together. The woman had been weak, but she used to hum to her swollen belly at night, when she thought no one could hear. "Let the song live on," she'd whispered to Maria once, gripping her hand with surprising strength for someone so frail. "Promise me. If anything happens to me, if I don't get to sing it to her myself, someone has to carry it forward. Songs aren't supposed to die with the person who loved them." Maria had promised. The way you promise dying strangers things you assume you'll never actually have to deliver on. She had hummed the woman's little lullaby back to her, memorized without meaning to, the way music sticks in memory long after names fade. She had never learned that woman's name. Patients came and went by the dozens. Maria had cared for her for less than 3 weeks before she was transferred to a different ward, and shortly after, Maria heard through hospital gossip that the young mother hadn't survived the birth. Maria dropped the shirt she was folding. It couldn't be. Could it? She found James in the study that night and told him everything. The young woman, the promise, the song she'd carried without knowing whose it was. James listened without breathing. "Sing it," he said hoarsely, when she finished. "Please. I need to hear you sing it, not Sophia. I need to know if it's the same." Maria's voice shook as she sang the first few lines. James closed his eyes. Tears he hadn't let himself cry in 3 years slid down his face without permission. "That's her," he whispered. "That's Elena's song. The one she wrote for our daughter before she was even born." But not everyone in the house welcomed this fragile, unexpected hope. Robert Kane, James's business partner of 12 years, arrived for a scheduled meeting 2 days later and found James distracted, emotional, uncharacteristically warm, talking about a housekeeper's daughter instead of the shipping contract on the table. "You're not thinking clearly," Kane said, not unkindly, but with the practiced concern of a man laying groundwork. "Grief does strange things to people, James. The board's already nervous about your instability, since Elena. If word gets out you're building attachments to your staff's toddler over some coincidence." "It's not a coincidence, Robert. It's a song, James. A common tune, probably, that 100 women have hummed to their babies. You're grasping." James didn't answer, but something in Kane's tone, a little too smooth, a little too rehearsed, stayed with him after the meeting ended. Diane Whitmore, Elena's older sister, arrived at the estate unannounced that same week, alerted by Thomas, who still reported certain things to her out of old loyalty. She found James lighter than she'd seen him in years, and it terrified her. "Who is she?" Diane demanded, watching Maria carry a laundry basket down the hall, Sophia trailing behind humming something under her breath. "The staff, James. You're looking at her daughter like." "Like what, Diane?" Like you're trying to replace Lily. Diane's voice cracked on her dead niece's name. Like you found some substitute family to paper over what we lost. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Her eyes were wet, furious, grieving in the only language she had left, anger. Because it looks like you're moving on, and I am not ready for you to move on, James. If you move on, it means she's really gone. James had no answer for that. Diane left without one, but she did not leave without a plan. That night, she hired a private investigator to look into Maria Delgado's background. Quietly, thoroughly, and with a growing, uneasy certainty that something about this housekeeper's sudden appearance in her brother-in-law's life was too perfectly timed to be an accident. 3 days later, the investigator called with results that made Diane go very still. There's a gap, he told her. A 3-month gap in her employment history, right around the time Elena Calloway died. Officially, she says she was between jobs. But her old co-workers at Riverside Memorial say she was let go. Quietly. And nobody will say why. Diane sat with that information for 2 full days before she decided what to do with it. She didn't go to James first. She went to old Thomas. I know loyalty means something to you, she told him, in the kitchen, late at night, when the rest of the house was asleep. But so does the truth. Doesn't James deserve to know what kind of woman he's letting raise his hopes? Thomas, torn between the man he'd served for 11 years and the sister-in-law who'd once been kind to him during his own hardest year, made the choice that would haunt him. There were conversations, he admitted quietly. Late ones. Him and the housekeeper. About Elena. About the song. It wasn't a betrayal of secrets so much as a betrayal of trust, but it was enough. Diane had what she needed. Meanwhile, unaware of the storm building against her, Maria sat with James in the nursery, Sophia asleep between them, and finally asked the question that had been eating at her for days. Say it's true, she whispered. Say I really was her nurse. What does that mean, James? What do you want it to mean? James looked at Sophia's sleeping face, so peaceful, so unaware of the weight adults kept placing on her. I don't know yet, he admitted. I just know that for 3 years, this house has felt like a museum for people who are gone. And these last few weeks, it's felt like a home again. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose either of you. Maria's breath caught. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the table between them. A text from a friend, a link, 3 exclamation points. Maria, is this you? She opened it with shaking hands. A tabloid headline glared back at her. Grieving billionaire's housekeeper exploits dead wife's memory. Insider claims staff member manufactured miracle connection to deceased Calloway heir. The article twisted every fragile truth Maria had shared in private. Her hospital past, the mysterious gap in her employment, even Sophia's innocent lullaby, into something calculated and cruel. It painted Maria as a woman who had researched James Calloway's tragedy and inserted herself into his life to manipulate a lonely, grieving billionaire. There was no mention of the dying woman's plea. No mention of a promise made in a hospital room to a stranger who had nothing left to give but a song. Just insinuation, dressed up as journalism. James. Maria's voice shook as she turned the phone to show him. James, I didn't do this. You have to believe me, I never. I believe you, he said immediately, already reaching for his own phone to call his legal team. This isn't going unanswered. But the damage moved faster than either of them could stop it. By morning, the story had spread. Comment sections filled with cruelty, about Maria, about her scheming, and worse, about Sophia, calling a 3-year-old's innocent humming the con, speculating about a toddler in ways no parent should ever have to read about their child. That was the moment something in Maria broke. I can protect myself, she told James that night, her voice hollow with exhaustion. I can't protect her from this. Not if I stay. Maria, running won't fix this. It'll look like guilt. Let me handle it. You don't understand. Her voice cracked. I've spent her whole life making sure the world doesn't get to hurt her before she's old enough to understand why. I won't let this house be the thing that finally does it." James reached for her hand, and for one moment, she let him hold it. Then she pulled away, because loving a solution wasn't the same as trusting it would work fast enough. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Maria packed a single suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with 3 weeks ago, and lifted her sleeping daughter into her arms. She left a note on the kitchen table, short and final, and walked out into the dark before she could change her mind. James found the note at 6 in the morning, in the handwriting of a woman who clearly hadn't wanted to be found in time to be stopped. "I'm sorry. I have to protect her. Please don't look for us. M." He read it 4 times before the words fully landed. 3 years ago, when Elena died, James Calloway had gone quiet. He'd let grief settle into the walls of his house and calcify there, and he'd told himself that was simply who he was now, a man who didn't fight for things anymore, because fighting hadn't saved the 2 people who mattered most. Standing in the kitchen with that note trembling in his hand, something in him refused to let that be true a second time. "Thomas." His voice cracked through the silent house like a whip. "Get the car. Now." Thomas appeared, pale, guilt written plainly across his tired face. "Sir, I need to tell you something first. About how the story got out." James's eyes narrowed. "Talk fast." Thomas told him everything: Diane's investigator, the late-night conversations he'd confirmed, the leak that followed within days. James's fists clenched, but there wasn't time yet for the anger that deserved. "Where would she go?" he demanded. "Family. Friends. Anything." "She mentioned a cousin once, in the city. That's all I know." "The bus station," James said suddenly, remembering an offhand comment Maria had made weeks ago about how she'd arrived in town. She didn't own a car, never had. She'd take a bus. "Which one leaves this morning?" Before he could leave, Robert Kane called, not by coincidence, James would later realize, but by design. Kane's voice was smooth, sympathetic, entirely too well-timed. "James, I heard about the tabloid story. Terrible business. Listen, the board's called an emergency session for this afternoon. Given the optics of your personal life right now, they're considering the leadership vote early. I think it's best if I step in, just temporarily, until things settle." James went very still. "You knew about this story before it broke," he said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. "Didn't you, Robert?" A pause. Half a second too long. "I don't know what you're implying." "You've been pushing for that vote for months. And suddenly, the one thing that could make me look unstable enough to lose it shows up in a tabloid 2 days before an emergency board session you just happen to already have scheduled." James's voice went cold in a way it hadn't been in weeks, but this time, the coldness had purpose instead of grief behind it. "We'll talk this afternoon, Robert. In front of everyone." He hung up before Kane could respond. Diane was waiting for him in the driveway, arms crossed, clearly expecting a fight. "You did this," James said, no preamble, no patience left for gentleness. "You had her investigated. You handed her secrets to a reporter like they were nothing." "I was trying to protect you." Diane's composure cracked, 3 years of grief finally breaking the surface all at once. "James, don't you understand? If she's telling the truth, if that really was Elena's nurse, and that's really Elena's song being sung in this house again, then it means we truly lost her. Both of them. Completely. And I'm not ready. I have never been ready." Her voice broke entirely. "You started smiling again. Do you know how long it's been since I've seen you smile? And instead of feeling happy for you, I felt terrified, because it meant moving forward, and moving forward feels like leaving them behind." James's anger didn't disappear, but something in it softened, recognizing his own grief wearing a different face. "Diane," he said quietly, "healing isn't leaving them behind. I think about Elena and Lily every single day. That's not going to stop. But I can't keep living in a house that only remembers them through silence. That's not honoring them. That's just disappearing alongside them. Diane wiped her eyes, shame chasing the last of her anger away. What can I do? Tell me how to fix this. Help me find her, James said. Before she gets on that bus. The bus station was loud and grey and utterly indifferent to the fact that James Calloway's entire life was about to leave on the 9:45 to the city. He spotted them near gate 14, Maria, exhausted, holding Sophia against her shoulder, both of them looking smaller than they had in the grand rooms of his house. Maria. She turned, and for a moment, hope and fear crossed her face in equal measure. James, don't. Please don't make this harder. The story's a lie, and everyone who matters is going to know it by tonight. He was breathing hard, like he'd run the whole way, though he hadn't. I'm not here to convince you to come back for my sake. I'm here because Sophia deserves better than to grow up thinking her mother had to run from a house that should have protected her. Sophia, half asleep on Maria's shoulder, stirred and looked at James with the same wide, trusting eyes she'd had since the day she wandered into his study uninvited. Beard, she mumbled sleepily, holding up an invisible block, and something in James's chest cracked wide open. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, voice thick. We'll build something. I promise. Maria's resolve wavered. James, the world already decided what it thinks of me. A press conference won't undo that. Then we'll show them the truth instead of just telling them. James held out his hand, not asking her to take it, just offering it. There's a shareholder meeting this afternoon. The same people trying to use this story to take my company are the same people who leaked it. I'm not letting them win using a lie about you and your daughter. Come with me. Let me make this right, in front of everyone who tried to make it wrong. The gala ballroom was packed by 3 o'clock, board members, shareholders, reporters who smelled scandal the way sharks smell blood in the water. Robert Kane stood at the podium already, mid-speech, painting James's erratic personal behavior and concerning attachment to household staff as reasons the board should consider new leadership, effective immediately. James walked in with Maria and Sophia at his side, and the room went utterly silent. Robert's right about one thing, James said, taking the podium without waiting for an invitation. I have been different these past few weeks. I'll tell you exactly why. He told them everything: Elena, the song she wrote for the daughter she never got to raise, the promise made by a stranger in a hospital room to carry a dying woman's love forward when she couldn't. He told them about a housekeeper who never once tried to profit from a coincidence she hadn't asked for, and a toddler who had, without meaning to, cracked open 3 years of silence in one afternoon. The story that ran 2 days ago wasn't journalism, James continued, voice steady now, sharpened by conviction instead of grief. It was a manufactured leak, timed suspiciously close to an emergency board vote that Robert Kane has been pushing for behind closed doors for months. I'd ask the board to consider that timing, before considering anything else. Murmurs rippled through the room. Kane's composure finally cracked. James, this is absurd, you're letting emotion. I have emails, Robert. Between you and the investigator hired to dig into Maria Delgado's past. Care to explain those to the board yourself, or should I? Kane had no answer. The silence that followed said everything the board needed to hear. The vote, when it came, was not close. By the end of the afternoon, Robert Kane's push for early leadership had collapsed entirely, and with it, most of his credibility at the company he'd spent 12 years helping build. The tabloid, faced with the full and documented truth, issued a retraction within days. Quiet, buried, but real. Diane stood at the back of the ballroom throughout the whole thing, and when it was over, she found James by the door. I owe you an apology, she said. Both of you. She looked at Maria, guilt written plainly on her face. I let my fear of losing them again turn me into someone I'm not proud of. I understand grief makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise, Maria said gently. I'm not angry. I just hope we can start over. Diane nodded, tears finally falling freely instead of being held back by anger. There's a place I go, sometimes. Would you both come with me? Elena and Lily's graves sat beneath a quiet oak tree, the kind of peaceful spot that made grief feel less like drowning and more like carrying something you'd learned to hold. James knelt and placed a single white flower against the stone. I found the song again, he said quietly, like Elena might somehow hear him. It found its way back to me. I think you'd have liked that it came through a little girl who has no idea how much she's carrying. Sophia, standing beside the headstone with the fearless curiosity of a 3-year-old, reached out and touched the cool stone, then looked up at James. Song? She asked. James laughed, really laughed, for the first time in 3 years, and lifted her into his arms. Yeah, baby girl. Let's sing it together. And there, under the oak tree, James Calloway sang his late wife's lullaby out loud for the first time since her funeral, his voice cracking, Sophia humming along beside him, Maria and Diane both crying the kind of tears that heal instead of hurt. 8 months later, the Calloway estate had music in it again. Not just Sophia's humming, though that still filled the hallways daily. There was a newly repainted nursery, this time not locked away in memory, but alive and waiting for the baby James and Maria were expecting in the spring. James had proposed in the same study where he'd first heard that impossible song, on the same rug where Sophia had once built her crooked block towers. Maria had said yes before he even finished the question. Diane visited often now, no longer afraid that James's healing meant losing her sister, but grateful that Elena's love had found a way to keep growing instead of simply ending. One evening, as James rocked his newborn son to sleep in the nursery, Sophia, nearly 4 now, full of new words and bigger opinions, climbed up beside him and began to hum. It was the same song. Elena's song. Passed now from a dying mother, to a promise-keeping nurse, to a toddler who never fully understood the weight of what she carried, to a new baby who would grow up hearing it as simply home. James closed his eyes and let the melody wrap around all of them. Some promises, it turned out, were never meant to end with the person who made them. They were only ever meant to be carried forward, passed from one set of hands to the next, until they found exactly where they belonged. If a stranger's song ever found its way into your life out of nowhere, would you have believed it was more than just coincidence? Or would you have needed to hear the last line, too, before you let yourself hope? The end.